Good evening. My name is Paul Strauss. In addition to serving as your senior elected United States Senator, I have the privilege of being the ranking delegation member of the New Columbia Statehood Commission. In that capacity, it's my honor and privilege to convene this town hall meeting to order. It's great to see so many people out here interested in our constitutional process. Before we begin taking public testimony, I'd like to introduce and welcome Ms. Betsy Cavendish, Esquire, one of the attorneys who's been working with our legal committee, who will explain the formation of our draft document and the procedures going forward. Counselor, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Senator. There are several other members of the legal team here tonight too, so this has been a group project in trying to formulate a draft constitution, so let me recognize those other members of the legal team. I see Janet Robbins here. Please hold your hand up. She's with the Legal Counsel Office of the Independent Attorney General. There's Professor Alan Morrison of the George Washington University Law School, formerly at the DC government and a public citizen, one of the foremost constitutional litigators in the country with landmark Supreme Court cases. Barry Kreisworth, who's Senior Counsel and General Counsel to City Administrator Rashad Young. Anyone else from the legal committee here tonight? Oh, Jessica Wasserman, I see her in back, and I believe she's in private practice and serves on some of the boards and one of the boards and commissions. So thank you all for coming tonight to this historic location where we commemorate some people who made history in the past, and I think we're all trying to participate in making history now. So I'm going to just give a little bit of background for those of you who've come to one of the first two town meetings or some of the recent meetings of the New Columbia Statehood Commission. This is very familiar to you. But how many of you have been to another Statehood Commission meeting? Well, a third. Okay, good. Some newcomers. So the plan here and why we're working on the Constitution is it's an integral part of becoming a state pursuant to what we call the Tennessee Plan. And so to become a state under the Tennessee Plan, there are several steps that need to take place. And so the council intends to send a measure to the Board of Elections asking 4 questions. Do the voters in DC want to become the 51st state? Do they approve the state constitution? Do they agree to the boundaries, which carve out a small federal district? And do they commit to a Republican representative form of government? That's Republican with a small r, no king government. And then if the Board of Elections certifies those questions, you will vote in November on those 4 questions. Then council will again vote to ratify this constitution and send it to the new president and the Congress, which could then pass an admissions act. So as the Senator and his colleagues on the Statehood Commission have said many times, we want to be in a position to ask a new president and the new Congress for statehood. So by way of background, Washington, D.C. has written a constitution before, and in 1982, the citizens had a constitutional convention and wrote a constitution, but that was not adopted by Congress. So in 1987, the council came back and amended that a bit, but that never became our charter for the 51st state. So the only governing document right now is our home rule charter. So the Statehood Commission asked our legal committee to take a look at those various documents, the 82 Constitution, the 87 Constitution, the Home Rule Charter, and try to come up with a constitution that's more modernized and that fits the people now. So we came up with a draft, and there have been many people, over 100, who've submitted comments online and at these meetings, and the legal committee is working through those to make recommendations to the commissioners at the statehood commissioners. And then we'll also have a convention where more testimony will be taken, but we're encouraging people to give us their comments on the Constitution now, so that we have a little more time to consider and make some recommendations to the commissioners who will be deciding on any changes. So The commission also gave us gave the legal committee a charge in thinking about some principles as we tried to modernize those other 3 documents. And they were to promote stability by maintaining the district's current basic governing structure, which we've now lived under for quite a number of years and seems to be working reasonably well, but to build upon those statehood efforts of the 80s and establish the structures that are necessary for good government and empower the legislature and executive to govern in the interests of the people who elect them. And I think that principle basically means you don't have to put it in the Constitution if it's a fit subject for the legislature to change by act later on. Produce orderly and responsible governance, reflect the values of the district residents, and demonstrate that the district merits congressional admission as a state. So thank you for coming to testify, and my colleagues on the legal committee and I look forward to hearing what you have to say, as I'm sure the commissioners do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Betsy. Let me just say that we look forward and are excited to be part of what is the most open and participatory constitutional convention, we believe, in the history of these United States. Literally, any citizen in the District of Columbia gets to be a delegate at this constitutional convention. And unlike the old ones that had to be done with quill pens or even typewriters, in this exciting modern age, you can propose your amendments or comments online or through a number of exciting digital ways. Let me also acknowledge and thank the Honorable Frank Smith, our host for tonight. We know that we're participating in something historic, but when we get a chance to have that effort framed, surrounded by such history, it really makes it more special. So thank you, and thank you to the museum. I urge you, to the extent that the museum will let you after this is over, to take a look at some of these wonderful exhibits here. It's truly a one-of-a-kind experience. We have our first witness. Let me also ask to come up and be ready to testify afterwards, Susan Volkman and Dion Wheeler, that will be our second and third witnesses. And Rob, if you would begin your testimony. We have a timekeeper here, I believe, who's going to be enforcing the rules. Tina, I think you're a little far away. Why don't you come up so that people can see you. Just take a seat right, join me here at the table, please. You're gonna yield your time? Okay. Is Mr. Champ or Ms. Champ here? Mr. Champ, would you?
I'll yield my time as well.
All right. We are already moving things along. Sir.
Hi, my name is Rob Hudson. I'm a longtime resident of DC by choice, and I want to thank everybody that's been involved in drafting this, in all the hard work that's gone into this first draft of the Constitution. I'm currently Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for ANC 1B, and welcome, you're sitting in it. There's a couple of points in the Constitution that I'm concerned about, and some of my colleagues are, that I think, if not changed, may serve to dilute the voice of the people. And so just want to quickly talk about the purpose of these. So right now the Constitution, it's drafted, creates a unicameral state, which Nebraska is the only state in the Union right now that's unicameral. It was passed in 1937 by a statewide vote. It's also worth noting that their unicameral legislature is entirely nonpartisan. So it's a completely different type of structure than we would be having here. While I understand the committee has based this choice on an easy transition from the current city government to the new state government, I think we're missing our chance. We already have other elected offices like the ANCs that could easily be transitioned into some sort of other house that would be opposite the legislature. The second item is, I think the Constitution, if the ANCs are still kept in there, it falls far short in that section. And the 1987 Constitution had a robust section on ANCs. Section 1001, it laid out specific sections that covered reapportionment, the authority to advise the state of Columbia, and the ability to employ staff and other powers and duties. What's a particular concern of this draft is that it removes the great weight of the ANCs to weigh in on any agency action. That's a necessary component if the ANCs are going to continue to be in there. Also, it removes the requirements of timely notice from agencies to the ANCs, who are the first line that residents have to dealing with all of this structure. Finally, there's no process defined for residents to amend the Constitution. Considering that it's a unicameral body, if at any point in the future the residents want to create a bicameral body, the legislature would have to pass that act. And I think we all can fairly assume that a legislature with power is unlikely to split its power into another body. So there needs to be some sort of part put into Article 7, Section 3, where it talks about how the Constitution can be amended by some sort of petition process or a referendum that's started by the people and then is voted on without the input or the approval of the legislature.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your testimony. I appreciate your comments. I certainly appreciate you serving as an ANC Commissioner or perhaps soon to be one of our county commissioners in the new state. You never know. And thank you for being here tonight.
Hello, my name is Dion Willer. I'm 22 years old and I've lived in DC for my entire life. This is actually my first time attending a statehood commission meeting. I was brought here by my former teacher, history teacher, so I'm more interested in learning more about statehood and why it would benefit us as a whole.
Okay. Thank you for that testimony. I think this has generally been designed as a forum for the citizens to testify and give us some input, but since you haven't used all of your time, for me at least, statehood is an opportunity for the District of Columbia as an entity to govern its own affairs. Right now, under our present system, we have 535 superfluous wannabe city council members, mayors, governors, people who interfere in our autonomy. And as much as the lack of my ability to represent you on a federal level in the United States Senate pains me, for many of us in the statehood movement, it is the lack of self-determination which on a day-to-day basis frustrates so much of our residents' intent and makes life here so difficult. Statehood is a constitutional way that solves both of those problems. It addresses our lack of federal representation, which we deserve as American citizens who pay taxes, serve in the military, meet all the obligations of citizenship, as well as providing for an autonomous, self-determinant structure as a state to govern our own affairs here in the United States.
Thank you.
I'd like to call up Jason McConnell, Laura Fuchs, and Talia Rhodes as our next three witnesses. Okay, we have somebody yielding. I also see that we have somebody who's already testified at one of our meetings before. Let me also bring up Brenda Jones. All right, and Eleanor Hart. Why don't you begin?
Hi, my name is Talia Rose, and I go to HD Wilson. I'm only 15 years old, and I was brought here by my history teacher, Ms. Fuchs. Since I only have 2 more years in high school, I just really want to know about how many rights we have as getting our education, because education is like really important to me, especially since I'm getting older, and to do a lot of things in your life you need a great education, and also for the young ones that's coming behind me in my family. And a lot of people don't have as many rights as I have, or at least as many opportunities as I have. It's no matter their grades or no matter how smart they are. So that's when you do the Constitution, as I know it is the rights of those who are in the state. I mainly wanted to go for those to have every right as they can to not only have the greatest education that they are able to achieve, but even more opportunities than they think that they'll have, no matter the obstacles that are set in their place. So that's what I want, and that's my testimony.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you making your voice heard, and I know I speak for the entire commission that I certainly agree with you that education is important. And we're going to look towards crafting a document that will give every resident of our new state an opportunity for a good education, because the most important title in any state isn't governor or state legislature, it's citizen. And to be an effective citizen, you need a quality education. So I'm especially pleased to see you here today. Thank you very much. Ms. Hart.
I'm going to let her teacher testify next, so she may want to follow up.
Do you have any more of your students here? I see. Why don't we, simply because you've had a chance already, maybe we could call you up with some of, how many other students of yours are here?
So one of them already one of them had some questions, Mr. Wheeler.
Uh-huh.
And we have two other students present. They weren't sure if they wanted to testify. They wanted to kind of see how it went and then maybe consider coming up.
Well, I'll tell you what then. Why don't we let Ms. Hart testify? We'll get through some of the other public witnesses. I'm going to ask you to yield the floor, as it were, and then we'll call you up as we get through some of the other witnesses. Maybe you and your students can come back and we can try and address some of those questions if we can.
Not a problem.
Ms. Hart, if you would begin, and then Susan Mott, and Roz Cohen. If you would take the next seat.
I'm going to yield.
You're going to yield, okay. I feel like I'm back on the hill. Keith Ivey. The unyielding Keith Ivey. Thank you for being all right, Ms. Hart. It's good to see you.
Hello. Kudos to the drafters for coming up with a document that is most likely to be approved by the DC Council and as free as possible of reasons for Congress to object, and for doing this so quickly. Thank you for this opportunity to make two major recommendations. First, about the name. I believe the name New Columbia should be retained. This will make it possible to build on the current momentum in Congress. There are now 133 House co-sponsors of the New Columbia Admission Act. In January, Eleanor Holmes Norton will be able to introduce a New Columbia Admission Act that is compatible with the referendum passed in November. And she will be able to probably get at least 125 of the current co-sponsors on the new legislation. My other recommendation is about the process for amending. I want to second what Mr. Hudson said. I think it really needs to be strengthened. We need to strengthen Article 7, Section 3, page 81. This is really our home rule charter with a few names changed, and it's a take it or leave it document. Therefore, the people of DC should have significant opportunity to try to shape the framework by which they are governed through the amendment process. The 1982 Constitution provided for starting the amendment process through a ballot initiative. This Constitution should certainly do no less. Citizens should be able to propose both specific amendments and a constitutional convention through a ballot initiative. Certainly this Constitution should do no less than the 82 Constitution, but it should do more. It should provide for a constitutional convention that will take place within 4 to 6 years after New Columbia becomes a state. This convention should review and evaluate all the operations of the state government during the intervening years, and propose any necessary changes that will make our state legislature, administrative agencies, and courts more responsive to the needs and wishes of DC citizens. Any revisions adopted by the convention must, of course, be ratified by a majority of the qualified voters in a ratification referendum. There should also be a provision for the House of Delegates to introduce a referendum calling for a constitutional convention.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Susan Matei, and I have a comment about the initiative and referenda section of the Constitution in Article 6. In 2009, when I worked for the DC Council, I wrote and helped my boss pass marriage equality for DC, and one critical component of that was that it could not be repealed by referendum because current DC law prohibits the rights of minorities to be subject to the vote of the majority. And that is one provision that's not repeated in the Constitution that I think does belong there, because if the Constitution enshrines the right to initiative and referenda, and then the DC Code narrows it by saying that, by repeating a similar law, that could be challenged as unconstitutional. Another option would be to delegate to the House of Delegates the ability to restrict the right to initiative and referenda. Although I wouldn't recommend that. I would actually just recommend kind of copying the current language in the DC Code and dropping it into the Constitution in this regard. The other comment I wanted to make was that a number of states have a Bill of Rights, but they expand certain rights a little more broadly than the federal Constitution does. And I think it would be consistent with DC values to expand our definition of equal protection, and even maybe add some provisions that are relevant to today's debate about state constitutional law, like having a voting rights section that prohibits the legislature from narrowing the rights of voters, for example, by a voter ID law or disenfranchising felons, for example. And even maybe clarifying our First Amendment to specify that for local purposes, corporations aren't people or money isn't speech.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Ivey.
My name is Keith Ivey. I've been a resident of DC for about 24 years. I'm very active in a group called DC for Democracy. I'm also active in the DC Statehood Coalition. And I'd like to thank the Commission for bringing this renewed attention to statehood. I'm very happy that that's happening, and I'm very happy that the Constitution is being revisited after 34 years. I have some a fair number of technical comments about the Constitution that I'm going to submit in writing later this week. But overall, my main concern is with the process as a whole, and I'm worried that it seems to be very rushed and somewhat undemocratic, and therefore I'm concerned about that. And then because of that, I am concerned about, as some people have said, the limited avenues for amendment later. So I fear that we will be stuck with a constitution that was put together in a few weeks, that was based mainly on the existing Home Rule Charter, which is an act of Congress, was not based on the constitutions that have earlier been done. I'm hoping that I'm unclear on exactly what the process for the Constitutional Convention is, but and how it is actually any different from the town hall. It just sounds like another venue for taking citizen input, which, considering the number of days left for finalizing the Constitution, doesn't seem like they're going to have a lot of effect. So I guess I just wanted to express those thoughts. Anyway,
that's
Well, thank you for your testimony. Let me just say, first of all, I'm focused on the very legitimate question as to whether or not the amendment process needs to include initiative and referendum as a vehicle for proposing amendments independent to the legislature. I think that's a good point, and I suspect it's going to be one that will be raising a lot of discussion. And I'm very glad that you raised your point about how, as much as we like the initiative and the referendum process, that there are times when it is simply not appropriate, such as when it could be used to repeal an important law that protects people who merit protection under what we now call our Human Rights Act. But what we don't want is a tyranny of the majority taking away rights of a minority that at a given time may find themselves unpopular. So struggling to find that balance between empowering the collective and protecting the rights of the individual is, I think, part of what makes any discussion of a constitution important and something that we're trying to look at. As far as the process itself being undemocratic, I honestly can't think of a more democratic process where literally anybody gets to come, comment, in person, online. I mean, I think in some sense what would be less democratic would be what we've done in the past, for example, in 1982, where we restricted the democratic process to 44 delegates out of several hundred thousand. And then in 1987, we had literally 13 people on the council make decisions on behalf of the rest of us. So what we're doing with this process certainly isn't my intent to do anything except empower as many people as we can, but we are not unmindful that this is a legal document, and we do want to take, let me just stick up for the lawyers here for a minute. They may not be great at everything, but when it comes to writing law or legal documents, they do play a valuable role. So we do want to be guided by some good advice when we can. Ms. Hart, I think you raised an interesting point at the beginning that to some extent reflects certain realities about the next phase of where this process needs to go. And while we are writing this document with the main audience in mind, the citizens of the District of Columbia, one of the great tragedies of our statehood movement was that in 1982, many of us have come to understand that some of the best intentions we had of creating a constitution that reflected, I think somebody used the word DC values, turned out not to be a vehicle that advanced our statehood, but became a distraction for some of our opponents to use against us in our movement. And I think if I understood your words correctly, those are errors that we don't necessarily want to repeat. That the most important thing we can do, regardless of how many legislators we end up with here in the District of Columbia, is get rid of those 535 extra ones that have no business being involved in our day-to-day affairs. So I thank you all for your thoughtful and detailed testimony. And Mr. Ivey in particular, I look forward to reading a more detailed submission. I can tell you that we are already beginning to go through these comments, and while some of them are more interesting than others, they're all being considered very, very seriously. We want to do this quickly because I, for one, feel that in 2008, for example, we had an historic opportunity that we really weren't ready for. We knew we had a new president coming in. We had a new Senate with close to a 60-vote majority at any one time. We had a Democratic House, and I remember you in particular, Eleanor, helped us get ready with signs and really making sure that the people coming to DC knew that we wanted statehood and were ready for statehood. But we didn't have a comprehensive legislative strategy behind that. And I guess the fact that...
I agree with that. I wish that you had started this process last year. I mean, it seems like there wasn't something new that suddenly caused it to be necessary to start this.
I think what's new is that we're beginning to sense that we have a possibility of yet again a transformative election. This is a governmental body, so I don't want to wax too political about what may or may not happen in congressional elections in other states. But let's just say that if again that opportunity presents itself, we really want to be ready. So there is a lot about this electoral process nationally that many of us did not predict. But given that opportunity, you're right. It would have been great if we had been able to start this sooner and maybe we're less rushed. But we are where we are. And we've certainly waited for our democratic rights a very, very long time. I think this is an opportunity that we don't want to miss. But I thank you for being a part of it, and I thank you for your leadership when perhaps all of the enthusiasm around the city was not that high, particularly you, Ms. Hart. We have often been lone voices in the wilderness on statehood, and I'm excited that these voices are joined by such an expanding chorus. Thank you. Barbara Helmig, John Hanrahan, and Melissa Henley.
Here you are.
I also note that I have been joined or am about to be joined by the distinguished gentleman from the District of Columbia, our United States Representative, the Honorable Franklin Garcia. Barbara.
I speak at the risk of being labeled unyielding.
No.
I'm Barbara Helmig.
Only in the best way.
I'm Barbara Helmig, have lived in the district in Ward 1 since the late 70s. I've served on the ANC and have been active in the civic life of DC in many ways. First, I want to say thank you, join the voices that are saying thank you to the Commission for the bold move that's putting us on the offense out of the wilderness, as you said. Let's get on the forefront of moving this forward. I also want to thank everyone who's spoken so far, really thoughtful, wise, important comments, things that I urge you and believe that you will give very serious consideration to. I wanted to speak briefly as a community organizer. I mean, we've got this first really big, important task of making sure we've got a good constitution, that we get through the convention, and then we have the next step of winning big in November. That we need to have a real reflection of the broad support that does exist for equality for DC, and really that's all we want. We just want to be equal to everybody else. So as an organizer, the one piece that I would lift up is the issue around how do we amend the Constitution. I mean, I know I don't need to remind this crowd that right now our true enemy, Congress, is preparing to tear up our budget and throw it out the window. Disobey the law of the land. We won that court case, but they're going to challenge us on that. Yeah, screw them. Screw them. Speaking not very well there. Did you get that?
The record will still record. Please continue.
So that's our real enemy. So we need to battle this out and get ourselves a good constitution. And if we then can add the piece, hey, if we don't quite agree on the name or this or that, big issues, important issues, that there's a way to say, yeah, all right, let's first win this, and then we can argue amongst ourselves in how to amend it. So thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Son. Yes, I am John Hanrahan, excuse me, Ward 2 resident, 51 years, and been active in the statehood, now statehood Green Party, going back, first vote for Julius Hobson, the father of the statehood movement. I'll save my grumpy comments for the last part, but I do want to say that that, first of all, the number of, you wanted to keep things, you said, in the same way it was now, and that's disturbing to me, that there'll be only 13 state legislators. Right now, with the council, 7 votes and a mayor, and this is a developer's dream, I'm afraid, that it entrenches the 13 members we have and puts those who can lobby the council the best in control. I would suggest that it be expanded to at least the 40 that was included in the 1982 Constitution that was approved by the voters. Let's see. This Constitution also lays out no specific duties that I can see for the Attorney General, and that seems to be a strange omission. And also I see that it makes it a partisan office, where before it was nonpartisan. And I've heard some people talk about getting Republican votes for this. I noticed that you eliminated the sort of minority seat provision, which sort of ensures that it'll be 13 Democrats from here to eternity. It also gives the mayor sole control over the planning process, which I think is extremely bad in this sort of over-gentrified situation we're faced with today. I'm sorry I didn't really plan on testifying today. The process, as I mentioned Julius Hobson, I think he would be a little bit disturbed. This is sort of a top-down process, and when you mentioned, I would take issue with you on the so-called Constitutional Convention, because we only have 2 of the 5 members of your commission here tonight. I see it as sort of a glorified budget hearing where everybody makes the remarks but aren't in on the final decision, which you would be if you had an actual Constitutional Convention where we elected people, they voted, and created a Constitution. So I guess my primary points, though, is 13 council members is a ridiculously low number. Consideration of a second house, of a lieutenant governor, and maybe making all the offices nonpartisan. Not that would, people would still be sort of disguised Democrats winning all the offices, but at least it would take that element away. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I do believe the Attorney General now is a partisan elected office. I think that one of the reasons that it got maybe a little bit confusing is that we had sort of that on-again, off-again election, and when we finally got around to electing our first Attorney General, something I was excited to see happen and I thought was an important step towards statehood, it was a special election that was timed with a general election, so it looked kind of like a nonpartisan election, but going forward, it was and will be a partisan election. Hopefully the next one will take place in the new state. I think when we talk about the mayor and the council going forward, remember, we're talking about different offices, so we want to kind of get out of that mentality. But I do know one of the other points was that the set-aside for the so-called non-majority party seats was something that was really imposed on us. It's always something that we as the voters could create if we wanted to, and of course it's always something that we as the voters have a choice over who we elect. There's nothing constitutional about electing all members of one party or another party. Voters will always be free to choose. But there did seem to be something very undemocratic about saying who we can or can't nominate. And so I do remember some lively discussion in some of the earlier things that while one of the guiding principles is that we wanted to make a smooth transition from district to state, we did not want to simply take along with us what we saw were the vestiges of colonial oversight, and that was certainly one of them. And while I miss Hilda Mason, I was not here and never had the chance to meet the late Julius Hobson, although he's someone who inspires me greatly. I think if we're objective, the minority party set-aside seats, at least lately, haven't exactly worked in the way that
Yeah.
they have been intended.
Yeah, I just was wondering if you could answer the why the 13 members rather than 40, 50, 60, 70. That just seems, that would, we might elect some people other than Democrats that way. Smaller districts.
This is not a point that has been made for the first time tonight. We do know that, in 1982 they said 40, in 1987 they said 25. Again, the number that I'm really focused on is getting rid of the 535, but all of these viewpoints are going to be considered, and one of the things that I am concerned about is, this thing goes forward into a campaign, and every time I envision a campaign, I try and think of the other side's 30-second spot sort of against you. And I'm worried how the perception that what this is going to end up doing is hiring or paying more politicians to people who may not understand the important democratic principles, but may be focused on their pocketbook or how certain markets may react. So we're trying to balance all of these competing
Yeah,
things.
but that's sort of giving up before you've even gone to battle. I mean, saying, gee, they might use an ad against us. That just doesn't seem to be.
I think one of the witnesses earlier mentioned that this Constitution, after it leaves the commission, has to go to 2 other places. And I think we need to be mindful that we, at least at this convention and commission level, are not the final arbiters of this. But we do want to have as wide a possible input and discussion as we can. Let me just recognize Representative Garcia for any statements or comments he wishes to make.
I don't, thank you so much, Senator Strauss. I don't have any comments. Just to thank Councilmember Frank Smith for hosting us here tonight. I can't think of a better place to discuss our freedom than this great place of history. So thank you so much, Councilmember.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your testimony. Let me invite up Anise Jenkins and Jesse Lovell. I know we've had a chance to hear from you at some other meetings, but you're always welcome participants at any meeting I'm presiding over.
All right, thank you so much again for having this process proceed. I just want to repeat what I said last time, and particularly, I'm not picking on Representative Garcia, but I am very, very concerned that we are not doing enough outreach to the community. People that I talk to every day, activists, people who are statehood supporters, don't know that this is happening. I have not, I want to know, I asked were there any flyers that we could help pass out? Were there any posters being processed? Was there anything besides the internet, basically, that was being used for outreach to the community? It was stated in the public engagement process section, quote, soliciting input from district residents. I don't think that's being accomplished. I think the fact that we are fitting in this room right now is direct demonstration of that. We need flyers, we need TV, we need PSAs, we need radio, we need churches, we need schools, and I'm so proud and happy that the teacher did bring her students, but we need a lot of public outreach for this to be a legitimate democratic process. And I just really wanted to be right. My name is Anise Jenkins, Stand Up for Democracy in DC Coalition, which has been fighting for statehood since 1997. And we want to make sure that this is right, that DC becomes the 51st state, and it's done in a democratic process. I have other comments to make specifically about the Constitution, and I'm going to submit those. But I am extremely, as I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I'm extremely concerned about the outreach to the community and the input that you will get from the community. If they don't have the opportunity to read the Constitution, I'm afraid that that might endanger the process, the fact that there will be those 4 points, voting for statehood, the boundaries, Republican form of government, and approval of the Constitution. If any of those fail, that will defeat the whole process. We do not want DC to go down in history as voting against statehood. I think we need to be very careful that the public has an opportunity to participate, and the process is too fast-tracked. Even if we have to decide to vote simply on the referendum for statehood, which I'm sure that would be the result, and postpone voting for the Constitution until a later time, I think that would be wise if there are not more outreach efforts. Thank you.
Let me hear from Jesse, and then I'll ask you both to remain. We can have some questions. Mr. Lovell.
Okay, thanks. My name is Jesse Lovell. I'm secretary for the DC Statehood Coalition, active in a number of other groups, DC for Democracy. And yeah, I would echo a lot of things I've heard from a lot of people tonight. I do think, among many other issues, technical issues with the Constitution, I do think, first and foremost, I'm always thinking about this amendment process and a constitutional convention process. You know, all of this needing to be spelled out in the Constitution, and perhaps even before the Constitution. In other words, before it becomes a legal document once we achieve our statehood. So I definitely want to go on record saying, you know, I am strongly in favor of working that out. But mainly tonight, I just want to again ask a couple of the questions I asked at a previous meeting in a slightly different form, but things about the process that I'm still looking for some clarity on. You know, first and foremost, will there actually be another draft Constitution before this process is, before the draft is then voted on the 24th and then sent to the council for approval? I'm still not clear on that, and it would be nice to know if there's going to be time or if there isn't. And I've heard good arguments both ways. Oh yes, there certainly will be, there has to be, but well, we're not sure there's going to be time because it really is only a 6-day window between the 18th and the 24th. You know, beyond that, I would like to see a pledge that there will be a constitutional convention. And, you know, and my feeling is, you know, we've put all this effort into getting people thinking about the Constitution, into coming up with all of these ideas. Let's not put this off. You know, let's say we don't get it in this first Congress. Maybe it takes till the second Congress. Maybe it takes till the 116th. Let's not wait 3, 4, 5 more years to figure this out. We've got so many people thinking about it now. I'd like to continue the effort. And my other question is, can you also give us some more clarity about the process for amending the draft, how this would proceed? Now, you know, we have this commission, and what is the expectation of what's going to be done after the 24th, after it's been submitted? Since the commission, I mean, are the only members who actually amend, what do you envision happening? So those are my two main questions.
Thank you very much. First of all, I can't speak for all the commissioners, but I think there will be another draft after the convention and before it goes to the council. It's one of the whole point of having the convention, as well as engaging the online process, these town hall processes. Let me also say that after it goes to the council, it is again not a locked document. It then, because this is going on the ballot and we'll have to follow that legal process, the council itself will probably have their own series of hearings if they follow their own rules and procedures, and there will be additional opportunities for input. And then, because this has to be put on the ballot by the Board of Elections, their process also includes public hearings as well. So,
but to be clear, the council does not have the ability to actually amend the document, do they? Just to be clear.
I'm going to punt that question to the lawyers, but my understanding is any legislation introduced, even this, is going to be potentially amendable by the council. Now, whether that's something they choose to do or not is a political question. Is there any of the attorneys who think I'm mistaken on that, or does the council have the right to amend what is set before it? I see some thoughtful looks, but no hands going up.
I thought I remembered in one of the early meetings that the idea was there was supposed to be sort of a division of responsibilities, and that the ballot language itself was more the purview of the council, whereas the drafting of the substance of the Constitution was the commission's responsibility. But if I'm wrong, I'd love to know. Just that was my impression.
Well, I don't know that we as the commission have the statutory authority, given our rules, to limit the legislature's exercise of their own internal procedures. Now, what is planned, what is proposed, and how that labor is divided, one of the things that I think makes this a dynamic organization is that one of our co-chairs is a member, in fact, the chairman of our state legislature as it is. So it's not like they're not participating in this process from the beginning. We have, I think, appropriate majority representation by the statehood delegation, because after all, this is really our wheelhouse, our portfolio, our job, as it were. But we have leadership from both our executive and legislative branches of the government. So this is an integrated process incorporating as many branches as we can. But I can't predict what the council will do when they get it. I think our job is to do as much as we can with this so that the document that we send to the council needs as little refining and improving as possible, which is why I do think this process is important, and why we want to seek as wide a participation from everybody and as many comments as we can.
Yes, I'd just like to say, if the flyers are developed, if the posters are developed, we will help you. We will help ourselves. We will get out there and put them out, but we need the material.
I appreciate that. Let me thank you for all the work you've done. You know, I remember being with you in many of those rooms back in 1997 when we watched what little sovereignty and self-determination we have get taken away. It was in many ways some of the darkest days of our movement, when I think we had the ability to govern only the Department of Parks and Recreation and maybe one or two other agencies, when we were under a control board, and even our elected officials, such as they were, couldn't even run the day-to-day operations. Let me just say that, and it's from 1997 on, me and you have hung plenty of posters and given out plenty of flyers. And I know a lot of us old-time folks still like getting information out those ways, but we are living in an exciting new century, and there are folks that are getting their information different ways. Let me just say this, as a member of the commission, you are authorized at any point to take any of that information that may be on a website and put it on a poster and get it out there, and we will get you the resources to help you. So
you're going to give us the money to do that, right?
We will find a way to help you. You know, one of the things they used to joke about us is that given the way we were funded, you know, we didn't even have money for a copier. Well, we've navigated the procurement process, and we got ourselves a mighty fine copier right there in our office. So at a minimum, we will be able to come and help you. You know, anything I say, I talk about printing a lot of paper. There are going to be people mad at me for killing trees, but we're going to help you, help us get the word out. We understand that sometimes there's just no substitute for putting something in somebody's hand. And I agree with you that as exciting as these modern communication electronic tools are, for a lot of us, there's no just substitute for good old-fashioned grassroots organizing and leafleting. So we're going to find a way to help make you part of that outreach process.
Let me just add at least that we're actually working, we probably should have something out in the next 2 days. We're working with a couple of newspapers to put something out also for the convention. And we're working also on a little spot. So all of that should be out in about 2 to 3 days at most.
and I'm tweeting and Facebooking. I don't want you to think I'm out of that. I do that too.
I know you do. I follow you.
I don't know, yeah, it occurs to me, I wonder if there's even a possibility of putting something at polling places on election day. You know, say, hey, coming up in November, you know, not in overtly partisan, you know, we're not campaigning for a candidate, we're just talking about something that's pretty important.
I agree with you. I think that's a great idea, and we're going to work with our team, not only our staff, but we've been joined by the mayor's senior advisor, someone who's been providing a lot of support and leadership on this effort. That is a great opportunity that we're not going to miss, so we appreciate that. We've also had some working groups, and I know that some people here are members of those working groups. They will be presenting their ideas to the commission on June 9th, and we hope to be better organized with better resources and tools once we hear from those folks that have volunteered to help us on those working groups. So thank you both for your testimony, and obviously for all the work you've done for our movement. Let me bring back Ms. Fuchs and her students, and if there is anyone who has signed up since we've begun, hopefully your name is on the list that they are handing me at this very moment. You on? Okay. Mr. Kidlow, I see some other folks signaling to me that they would also like to testify. Perhaps we have one more list, or if there's a member of my team that can go around and just quickly, anybody that wants to testify whose name we don't have, hold up your hand and somebody's going to come around, take down your name, and I'm going to make sure we call you up. I have been given a list of 3 names, Adrena Crockett, Janet Brown, and Rebecca Stack. So if that's the next list of names we'll be calling after the students, and we're going to take anybody else that's here who wants to sign up.
Want me to go first? Sure.
We're gonna let you all sort of work together, so if there's a way you want to organize it, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'll keep my comments brief then. Is it going to be 5 minutes if we're an organization?
Well,
It's fine.
we'll yield you such time as you may consume, as they say, but try and be respectful of the other folks here.
Not a problem. So I'm Laura Fuchs. I'm a teacher at H.D. Woodson Senior High in Ward 7. I've been there for 9 years. I also teach DC history as one of the subjects. I'm a social studies teacher in advanced placement U.S. government and regular U.S. government. So these are things I think about a lot and hope to help my students think about. I think a lot of the comments today about outreach in particular really affected me because as an educator, outreach is a lot more than just providing an opportunity for comments. And I think as we kind of saw, a lot of people still have questions. And I think there is still kind of a confusion as to how we can go about getting answers to those questions. There's a way to easily make comments, but these are legal documents and those can be hard to access. And I mean, it's my job to teach high schoolers how to access these documents, and it takes a long time and study. And I mean, they end up coming out knowing a whole lot. I'm very proud of these 2 young people sitting beside me. They both did an excellent job in advanced placement U.S. government this year and are graduating. And they're wonderful, but not everyone has those opportunities to engage with these documents, and so we need to find ways to break down these documents. And so I'm hoping that the working groups have thought about how do we break these down, how do we teach people about them, how do we compare the different constitutions over time, so that people really understand what they're reading and what the implications are of what they're reading. Because while some of us may now be able to access those documents, and for a lot of us who work in government, that might be very easy, these are not simple documents, and they're going to affect all of us at a very fundamental level, and so we need to do a better job of educating. And it's hard to ask for comments when we haven't done the upfront work of educating the public about the implications of the draft that they're reading. And so I hope that we will be provided further opportunities to comment in the future once we've really done the work of breaking down what we're trying to do.
Thank you very much. Why don't you present your students?
Hey, my name's Khalil Stoddard. I'm a senior at H.D. Woodson, School of East Fuchs. I think one of the main concerns I have, like my fellow student brought up, was education and how is that being implemented to actually help us in this new constitution, or like as he stated earlier, he said in some constitutions there's a right to education, and how is that being implemented in this new constitution? I would like to know how it's being implemented, you know? So that's really my main question, and how is that gonna, like, what are you actively doing to make that easier on the students and the parents of the students?
Thank you.
I'm Andrea Anderson. I'm also a student of Ms. Fuchs. I've had the honor of having her for DC History and AP US Government. We actually had a project on statehood for DC History class, and I learned a great amount about everything that's going on. I like, the process of what's going on here and the initiative that everyone's taking to make the necessary, things come true to bring statehood to DC. To piggyback off what the young lady said earlier and what my teachers also said about the outreach, I think that's very important, because as I was saying to my teacher before I took her class, I didn't really know too much about government, let alone that this opportunity would be, brought forth toward me. So coming from my environment and being a part of the student body where we don't really know a lot about government and DC to statehood and what that means, and how important it is for us and the people that come after us. So I really think that it's important, whether you tweet, Instagram, Facebook, have papers, people going door to door, it's very important. Because like I said, if I didn't take her class and do so well, I wouldn't know about this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony, and kudos to your teacher for getting you so involved in this process and having you here tonight. Let me just say that speaking broadly on why statehood is important to your education, not only do I think the average student may not realize it, but the average citizen may not realize the tremendous extent that Congress right now interferes in the day-to-day operations of our school system. When I go to the Senate, sadly not as a voting member, but as your elected advocate, every time there's an appropriations bill, without fail, there are members of the Senate and companions of theirs in the House who are using our budget process in particular to impose their own social policy ideas, particularly on our public education system. And so getting them out of that process and making this a process of DC residents, by DC residents, for DC residents, will go a long way to improving our ability as a community to get you the resources that you need without worrying about them being diverted into vouchers or other types of programs where people are trying to divert the resources that we want to give to education and making it the priority we want to. So under the way we are now, not being a state, if our government decides that we want to fund the school system at this amount, but Congress decides that they want to see less money spent on schools and more money, say, spent on police or something that they want to see, Congress can overrule what we want to do with our own money. So statehood stops that. It makes both the rights and the responsibilities with DC residents, not outside members of Congress. As far as the specific Constitution, what we're trying to do is create a vehicle and a structure that will get us statehood, that ultimate goal. I will say that unlike now, the State Board of Education is elevated to the level of a constitutional office, which means that it can't be abolished or restructured without amending the Constitution. Right now, the State Board of Education is essentially more of a product of statute. So I think what it does is it elevates at least our State Board of Education and gives it the prestige and protection of being a constitutionally enshrined office. But again, how well that's going to work going forward depends on the quality of people that voters are going to elect to these offices. So putting an office in the Constitution is just the start. It's really going to be, again, my first, reminding you that the most important title isn't teacher or governor, it's citizen, and how engaged you will become as citizens, and the choices you're going to be making as voters, and who you're going to put in the offices that are going to be created by this Constitution that will ultimately determine the quality of your education. Thank you very much for being here today, Representative Garcia. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, let's give him a round of applause. Adrena Crockett, Janet Brown, and Rebecca Stagg. Seeing two seats, let me call up Debbie Hanrahan and Jabani Zakia. Jabari. Debbie, why don't you join us?
My pleasure.
All right. Would you begin?
I'm Janet Brown. When I came to the district in 1958, because I got married to somebody who lived here, I felt as though I had been robbed of my citizenship. And I felt that way ever since. I think Mayor Bowser deserves a great deal of credit for raising this issue, for putting it out there, and making it real. And we really do, I mean, none of her predecessors, no other mayor, no other council members have taken this issue seriously, and they have not ever really done anything about it, nor the commissioners before them. So we owe her a great deal. I think everyone in the room is very much aware that the time in which we have is very, very limited, and that we are very likely to end up with something, a document that not all of us are happy with. In fact, maybe one that many, many of us are unhappy with in some way. So I think the amendment process, which Eleanor Hart was the first one to raise, and which I've got some copies of what she read to you, is very, very important. I can't imagine having a constitution in a republic government of a republic, that doesn't have an amendment process. I mean, that times change, needs change, so we really do need that. The time is very short, and we need real resources. What I, as a citizen, want is to have, right now, and I hope that everybody in this room will ask the candidates who are running for office next week to put these things in a budget and fund them. We need, first of all, strategists, consultants who know what, who can help us move as quickly as possible. We need lobbyists, not just lobby by any means, but to train us citizens to do it more effectively. And thirdly, we need community organizers. I was very pleased to hear that I'm not the only one who thinks we ought to have community organizers out there in every single ward. And the council has got to have a proposal before it to do that now. This is our chance. Yes. And we can't let it go by without really putting our hearts into it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And our money.
I would like to second what Janet Brown has to say about the amendment, the absolute requirement that we have an amendment process. Otherwise, many of us will vote against the Constitution. There's no question about it. Without that, it's a dead item. Also, I'd like to say I do agree that the mayor has stepped forward, and I compliment her for that. But she stepped forward in a very narrow sense. It's herself and a handful of people drafting, passing, talking about creating a constitution. And I would like to take issue with your statement about what a real constitutional convention is. When it was drafted in the when we went about it in the early 80s, we worked very hard for a year. We held an election to whether or not to hold a constitutional convention. During that whole year, people were talking about statehood, statehood, statehood. Then people came forward and ran as delegates to the Constitutional Convention. And again, there was citywide discussion about what is statehood, who wants to be a statehood representative. And then they met for 90 days at UDC with experts from all over the country to advise them as people, as representatives, not as lawyers, but as representatives of all 8 wards of this city. And the document that was produced represented our city. And it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. People who went through that convention said they never wanted to go through another thing like it. However, it was a genuine citizen effort. I don't think we can say that about this. I understand the constraints of time. I understand them. I think they're kind of almost pushed on us, so we're on the horns of a dilemma here. But I do think the citizens of the city, although it happened 30-some years ago, the original Constitutional Convention, we are primed, we are aware, and to have a constitution that is seriously enshrining the city government that we currently have under the Home Rule Charter is an insult. Is an insult. Thank you very much. And I know the power structure of the city is just tickled to death because they do not have to share their power with a larger, wider legislature. However, that doesn't work. We will not be the great state we could be with the citizens that we have if you leave us with 13 members and a mayor. That is not adequate. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jabari Zakia. I'm a native Washingtonian, and I graduated from McKinley High School, lived most of my life, and I'm a member of the DC State Green Party. First of all, just some visceral observations. I noticed on this paper with the upcoming events, the 6 dates, 5 of them in Northwest and 1 in Southeast and 2 at Wilson High School. That doesn't seem like a very diverse set of places to have meetings at. To not repeat what other people are saying, first of all, a constitution is about power, right? A constitution is about who's going to have the power. In the original constitution for this country, people that look like me were written out of having any power, and we still don't really have any power. So philosophically, a constitution is about who's going to have the power. And I just wanted to make some observations about some specific elements. I have not read the document yet, so I don't know if these are in there, but I'm going to raise them to present another philosophical way of how you look at these things. First of all, proportional representation. In many countries, we have proportional representation. That could be by race, gender, sex, economic status. We don't have to keep this same European model of who gets to choose from what group of people. And that's structurally embedded into this thing. We need to open up the whole thing because other people's conceptualization of government needs to be brought in. Another historical means of governing needs to be considered before we just vote on a European model. Second, things like incarceration. I don't know if it's in here, but it should be a provision in the Constitution where only the government can be engaged in incarceration. There should be no private prisons, no private halfway houses. You should constitutionally bar people, entities making money off incarcerating people. Second, another provision, instant runoff voting. I know David Grosser had a bill in to create instant runoff voting, but I think something like that should be specifically put into the Constitution, that all voting should be instant runoff voting, and so that people can rank their choices, and so people will be encouraged to come out and vote for who they actually would like to vote for, and not just be tied into what the system gives them to choose from. Third, I don't know what is in there, but there should be a provision to create a state bank like in North Dakota. Okay. Because of our size, we should have a state bank, and we can control our resources. We can pull whatever we want, and we can then dole that out to whatever we think. And that's one of the most important ways to be independent, be in control of your finances. Another measure is voting age. Tacoma Park, you can vote at 16. I know in DC you can register to vote at 16, but most 16-year-olds don't even know that they can register to vote at 16. We need to really consider who do we want to be able to vote and at what age. And last, just visually looking at the Constitution, I think it's too long. I mean, the American Constitution is very small, and the size of your Constitution basically constitutes how much you don't trust the people. Because if you trust the people, you don't need to put all kinds of provisions for every little conceivable thing. And if people understood their role, then they can then, along with the amendment process, be able to fix whatever they feel is broken in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. I would urge you to read it, because I think some of the things you're talking about are maybe addressed, and you have a lot of good points that I think you want to see added to it, and then I'm also hearing that it's too long at the same time, so I'd be curious to hear more from you after you've had a chance to review it more thoroughly, what you thought worked and didn't work. Let me just stress, though, by the way, in case it's not clear, this Constitution certainly does have an amendment process in it. In fact, in some of the earlier discussions of these drafts, there were questions about whether or not the amendment process that we would have would require perhaps a supermajority, like a high number, like 2/3 of the existing legislature to propose an amendment, or whether or not it was a simple majority. The current draft settled on a simple majority because we recognize that this is an initial document, and we did not necessarily, at least in this version, want to set the bar too high.
There's no right of the citizens to
No,
amend?
I understand that there is a distinction between an initiative process that would propose possible amendments, which does not currently exist. But it's not quite accurate to say that the document itself lacks an amendment process. It certainly has one, and from a legislative sponsored standpoint, simple majority is actually one of the lower thresholds for proposing an amendment when you look at how other
But
constitutions.
there's no room for citizen amendment, then there's really no right of amendment.
I understand your point.
I know you're the lawyer, but I'm just saying.
No,
the power structure retains and holds its power because only it can amend and give up its power, which it never will do.
Well,
so you need
I
citizens.
hope you're wrong about that, because this entire exercise is about getting a power structure, namely the Congress of the United States, that has power over us, to give that power up. So this is in fact a very exercise in those of us in the District of Columbia fighting a power structure and getting them to give up power. So you don't need to tell me what a difficult challenge that is. It is true that has been said by greater men than I, power concedes nothing without a struggle, and this is certainly a struggle, but the power we're really focused on trying to get people to give up is that of the Congress of the United States over the citizens of the District of Columbia. I do recognize that there are many times, certainly I as a citizen may take issue with how aspects of our government work, but for me this is an exercise in freeing the 700,000 from the tyranny of the 535 who we don't elect, regardless of what problems we have with the number of legislators that we ultimately, a number of officials that ultimately we will end up electing.
It is not a small matter.
It is not a small matter, but we are focused on an important goal here, which is to get the District of Columbia free from congressional interference. And once that happens, and I agree with you, we need to look carefully at an appropriate amendment process. But really, we also want to keep our eyes on the prize here and make sure that we understand who we're fighting and who ultimately we need to get this Constitution ultimately through, because it should end and stop with us, the voters. But we know that unfortunately there are realities that involve other people in our process that we want to get out.
That's another reason we need resources.
And let me, I'm glad you brought that up, because you're right. Everybody who serves in the delegation has always been advocating for more resources, and we certainly can use them. But I also appreciate you recognizing this mayor for her initial leadership on it, and I do think I want to acknowledge that this administration, at least, we're grateful for at least giving us more resources than we have have ever had
It's not
before.
enough.
I
And
don't.
then it's not all up
I
to her
don't
too, it's gonna be the
disagree
council
with you.
members.
We would always, we could always use more, but it is important to give positive feedback where it's appropriate. And I want to thank you for recognizing the leadership of our mayor, and we in the delegation appreciate the additional resources that we've got. We're trying to use them as wisely as we can, and we appreciate you being advocates for more resources in that effort. So thank you all very much for testifying. The working groups have been meeting. If you would like to catch up with what they're doing, please visit our website, statehood.dc.gov. We encourage all of you to use that opportunity to get up-to-date information and to get more involved. This is one in just a series of town halls that we are having in as diverse an area of the city. I want to thank everybody for coming out. We had a great turnout tonight. And in closing, let me again, if you haven't taken advantage of this special opportunity, please visit the exhibit. Let me just recognize we have been joined by, before I close it out, by one of our commission's co-chairs, the chairman of our legislative branch of government, Chairman Phil Mendelson. Let's acknowledge him and give him a round of applause. Mr. Chairman, we have gotten through the testimony portion of our meeting. Before we adjourn, I'm happy to yield the chair to you if there's any comments you wish to make. Seeing none, thank you all for coming out tonight, and please take a few minutes to enjoy this fabulous exhibit before the museum closes and asks us to leave. The next one is tomorrow at the Raymond Recreation Center, 3725 10th Street Northwest in Ward 4. If you can, please RSVP through the website and encourage, and let me just say, for those who say that they want to see more outreach, you are all officially deputized. Do some outreach, get some people to tomorrow's meeting. We would like to see you all there. Huh? You need badges? You don't need no stinking badges. Just go and, no. Just go and bring people, you are all officially deputized. With that, I bring this meeting to a close.